The judge didn't award me a house. He ordered them to rebuild it. I left my Montana timber ranch for 6 weeks, expecting overgrown grass, a sagging fence, and a mailbox full of junk. Instead, I drove through my own gate and found nothing but a concrete foundation where my family's century-old home had stood. The HOA president smiled, handed the sheriff a demolition permit, and told me I'd owe her for tearing down my own house. She thought she'd erased my rights. What she didn't know was that one forgotten camera, one missing safe, and one impossible question from the sheriff were about to expose everything. If you enjoy true-style stories about standing your ground with patience, evidence, and the law, consider subscribing. Now let me show you how a single bulldozer uncovered the truth no one expected. The first thing I noticed was the gate. Not the one I built 15 years ago from rough-cut cedar. That gate was still standing, hanging slightly crooked the way I'd left it before driving 3 states away to supervise a wildfire rehabilitation project. What caught my eye was the steel sign bolted across it. Danger, structure removed by order of Black Pine Ridge, HOA, do not enter. I slowed my pickup until it rolled to a stop. For several seconds, I simply stared. My ranch sat 72 acres outside Livingston, Montana. My father bought it long before Black Pine Ridge existed. My grandfather rebuilt our house around the shell of an old logging cabin that dated back to 1912. Nothing about my land had ever belonged to any homeowners association. So why was their sign hanging on my gate? I climbed out, unbolted it, and tossed it into the truck bed before driving the rest of the gravel road. The farther I went, the stranger everything looked. Fresh tire tracks carved through the dirt where no heavy equipment had ever been. Several mature pines had orange survey paint sprayed across their trunks. My split-rail fence had been crushed in 2 places, as though something weighing 30 tons had driven straight over it without slowing down. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the county had done emergency road work. Maybe firefighters had needed access while I was gone. Neither explanation survived the next turn. My house was gone. I slammed on the brakes so hard the truck skidded sideways in the gravel. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. The porch where my father used to drink coffee every morning had vanished. The stone chimney my grandfather laid by hand was nothing more than a pile of broken rock. The workshop where I'd restored chainsaws and surveyed timber contracts had disappeared. Only a cracked concrete foundation remained, surrounded by twisted pipes, shattered lumber, broken glass, and deep bulldozer tracks pressed into the earth. An excavator still sat beside the foundation. Its bucket rested on the ground like it had simply stopped working halfway through destroying my life. I shut off the engine, but didn't move. Everything inside that house had been there when I left 6 weeks earlier. Family photographs, my father's hunting rifles locked in the safe, original ranch records, tax documents, survey equipment, my office, my entire professional archive. Gone. When I finally stepped out, my boots crunched across splintered oak flooring scattered across the dirt. Near what used to be the front porch, I found another steel sign driven into the ground. Unsafe structure removed under emergency authority of Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Below it sat an official-looking county seal and a typed signature. I didn't recognize either one. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. "This is Ethan Mercer," I said as calmly as I could. "Someone demolished my house while I was out of state." The dispatcher paused. "I'm sorry. Demolished? There's nothing left." She promised to send a deputy immediately. I spent the next 20 minutes walking what used to be my home. Every step made less sense than the last. The demolition crew hadn't simply removed the house. They'd flattened the garden, crushed the stone retaining wall, pulled out my well pump. Even the old wooden sign reading Mercer Ranch, carved by my father nearly 40 years ago, had disappeared. Whoever ordered this wanted more than a building gone. They wanted every trace that I'd ever lived there. Dust drifted down the driveway. A white luxury SUV appeared between the pine trees. Rebecca Holloway stepped out wearing pressed khaki pants, polished boots, and the kind of smile people practice before delivering bad news they don't actually regret. But behind her climbed two HOA board members carrying clipboards. She looked around the property as though inspecting completed landscaping. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I'm glad you've finally returned." I stared at her. "What happened to my house?" "It was removed. I can see that." She folded her hands neatly. "It had become structurally unsafe. The board declared it an abandoned hazard after multiple notices went unanswered. I was working under a federal forestry contract. We weren't aware of your personal schedule. My ranch isn't in your HOA." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened a leather folder and removed several papers. "We acted under emergency authority after consulting the proper agencies." She handed me a demolition permit. At first glance, it looked official. County seal, inspector signature, permit number. Everything someone expected me to accept without asking questions. Then she spoke again. The association also incurred substantial expenses during removal. I looked up. "What expenses?" She smiled. "You'll be receiving an invoice." "You destroyed my house?" "To eliminate a dangerous structure," she interrupted. "Naturally, those costs remain your responsibility." I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because my mind couldn't process that another human being could actually believe those words. "You expect me to pay for demolishing property you had no authority to touch?" Before she answered, another vehicle rolled onto the ranch. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped out of his patrol truck. He'd covered this county longer than I'd lived on the ranch. After shaking my hand, he walked directly to Rebecca. "You the HOA president?" "I am." She confidently handed him the permit. "The matter has already been resolved." Daniel spent nearly a minute reading every page. His face never changed. Finally, he looked at Rebecca. "Mind if I ask you one question?" "Of course." He tapped the permit number printed across the top. "Why does this file number not belong to any county format I've ever seen?" Rebecca's smile disappeared. For the first time since arriving, she didn't have an answer. Rebecca glanced at the two board members behind her, as though one of them might rescue the conversation. "I'm sure that's just an administrative format," she finally said. "The county updates its numbering system all the time." Sheriff Daniel Brooks didn't argue. He simply folded the permit closed. "I've worked with county permits for 23 years, he replied evenly. "I've never seen this sequence." Rebecca forced a smile. "Perhaps you should verify it with the building department." "I intend to." She nodded once, climbed back into her SUV, and drove away without another word. The two board members hurried after her, avoiding my eyes as if looking at me too long might make them responsible for what had happened. Daniel watched the dust settle before turning toward me. "Ethan, don't touch anything." "I wasn't planning to. I want photographs of every inch of this place before anything changes." Within an hour, deputies documented the foundation, the broken chimney stones, the bulldozer tracks, and every remaining piece of debris. Daniel collected the permit as evidence and promised he'd speak with the county first thing the next morning. "I've got a bad feeling about this," he admitted before leaving. "So do I." The following morning, a certified envelope arrived at the temporary mailbox beside my gate. The return address read, Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Inside was a 4-page invoice. Emergency demolition. Sought, 96,000 hazardous debris disposal. 5,000 emergency management. 38,000 legal review and enforcement. 24,000 community recovery assessment. 24,000 total due, 236,000. At the bottom, one sentence stood out more than every number on the page. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in a lien against the Mercer Ranch property. I read it twice before folding the letter. They hadn't destroyed my house by mistake. They intended to take my land. An hour later, I sat across from Rachel Bennett, a property rights attorney whose office walls were covered with framed survey maps instead of expensive artwork. She listened without interrupting while I spread my deed, tax receipts, and the demolition invoice across her conference table. When she reached the original deed, she smiled for the first time. "This changes everything." "How?" She pointed to a paragraph typed in faded ink. "Your ranch was patented in 1954. "I know." "Black Pine Ridge wasn't incorporated until 2009. "I know that too." "What matters is this clause." She tapped the page. "This parcel shall remain independent of any future subdivision covenants unless voluntarily joined by recorded agreement." She looked directly at me. "Did you ever sign anything joining the HOA?" "Never." "Then they have exactly zero authority over your land." For the first time since seeing my house reduced to rubble, I felt something besides anger. Hope. Rachel picked up the demolition permit. "I'd like to verify this personally." By noon, we were standing inside the county building department. Rows of archived permit books filled metal shelves behind the counter. Retired County Inspector Tom Alvarez happened to be volunteering there that day, helping organize decades of old construction files. He recognized me immediately. "Ethan Mercer." He shook my hand, then noticed the permit lying on the counter. His expression changed. "Mind if I see that?" He adjusted his reading glasses. His eyes stopped at the signature. "No." Rachel leaned forward. "You know the inspector?" Tom looked up slowly. "I knew him." "What do you mean?" "This signature belongs to Harold Jensen." He placed the paper back on the counter. "Harold died 2 years ago." Silence filled the records room. Tom pointed again. "And that's not his signature." Rachel asked the clerk to search the permit number. The clerk typed for less than a minute before frowning. "No record." She searched again using my address. Nothing. Then my parcel number. Still nothing. "There has never been a demolition permit issued for Mercer Ranch." Rachel slowly closed the folder. "This wasn't an administrative mistake." "No," Tom said quietly. "Someone manufactured government authority." Rachel looked at me. "The question isn't whether they forged the permit." She slid the fake document back into its envelope. "The question is why they believed your house had to disappear." Rachel didn't wait for an answer. Before we even left the county building, she drafted a formal preservation notice demanding Black Pine Ridge preserve every email, payment record, contractor invoice, security recording, board minute, and financial document connected to the demolition. By law, destroying evidence after receiving such a notice could become a separate issue in court. The notice was delivered that afternoon. Less than 3 hours later, Black Pine Ridge posted an announcement on its community website: "System failure." According to the statement, an unexpected server malfunction had temporarily disabled access to meeting records and archived board documents. Rachel looked at the screen and gave a quiet laugh. "They've already started panicking." "You think they're deleting files?" "I think they expected you to disappear after the house did." The following morning proved she was right. As I drove into Livingston for supplies, I noticed copies of the local newspaper displayed outside the grocery store. The headline caught my attention immediately. "Ranch owner sues HOA after abandoned house removal." The article quoted Rebecca Holloway. She described my home as a dangerous eyesore that had threatened nearby residents for years. She claimed the association had acted only after I ignored repeated warnings. She even suggested my lawsuit would force innocent homeowners to pay enormous legal bills because I refused to accept responsibility for my own neglected property. By sunset, handmade signs had appeared near the subdivision entrance. "Don't make families pay for his mistakes. Stop the Mercer lawsuit." Several passing drivers slowed just enough to look toward my ranch before continuing down the highway. I didn't remove the signs. Rachel advised against responding publicly. "Every interview helps Rebecca. she said. Every document helps us. Instead, we returned to the demolition site with structural engineer Paige Sutton. She spent nearly an hour walking the foundation, measuring excavation depths and photographing bulldozer marks. Finally, she stopped near what had once been my office. Something doesn't fit. What? She pointed toward a trench cut almost 4 feet below the original slab. They excavated far deeper here than anywhere else. I looked around the foundation. The rest of the demolition had stopped at grade level. Only my office had been dug into. They weren't just removing a building, Paige continued. They were looking for something. My stomach tightened. Beneath my office floor had been a fireproof steel vault anchored directly into reinforced concrete. Very few people even knew it existed. Inside were the original Mercer Ranch patent, historic survey maps dating back decades, tax records, family journals, my grandfather's handwritten boundary notes, and certified copies of easement agreements involving the old county highway. There were also contracts from nearly every forestry project I'd completed during the last 20 years. None of those documents existed anywhere else. I walked directly to the spot where the office had stood. Only an empty pit remained. The vault was gone. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Rachel finally broke the silence. Ethan! They knew exactly where it was. You've never mentioned the vault publicly? Never. Anyone outside your family? I shook my head. My father showed it to me when I inherited the ranch. That was it. Paige crouched beside the excavation. The crew used a smaller machine here after the main demolition. How can you tell? The bucket marks are different. She brushed dirt away from the edge of the trench. Someone carefully extracted something heavy before the rest of the debris was pushed aside. Rachel slowly stood. This changes the entire case. I thought destroying the house was the case. It was. She looked directly at me. But now we know the house wasn't necessarily the target. As we walked back toward my truck, I stopped and looked across the empty foundation one more time. For years, Rebecca Holloway had tried buying a narrow strip of land along the eastern edge of my ranch. 3 separate offers, 3 polite refusals. The last conversation came back with uncomfortable clarity. She hadn't been angry. She'd smiled. You'll sell eventually, she'd told me. I just don't think you realize it yet. At the time, I thought she was talking about money, standing beside the hole where my vault had disappeared. I began to wonder if she'd been talking about something else entirely. Rachel didn't say anything during the drive back to her office. She spread 3 county plat maps across her conference table, lined them up with recent planning documents, then asked me one question. Ethan, has anyone besides Rebecca ever tried to buy land from you? Not seriously. What about developers? A few letters over the years. I threw most of them away. She traced a red marker across one map until it stopped exactly where my house had stood. There, I leaned closer. What am I looking at? The proposed entrance to Black Pine Ridge Phase 2. She pulled out another document obtained from the county planning office. The application described a luxury expansion consisting of 68 mountain homes, an equestrian lodge, a retail village, and a private highway entrance. One problem sat directly in the middle of the engineering drawings. Mercer Ranch. Rachel slid the maps together. The highway access can't be built unless someone controls this strip. Her finger rested on the exact location where my foundation now lay buried beneath broken concrete. The road goes right through my front yard. It goes through your house. Silence settled over the room. Rebecca hadn't wanted my home removed because it looked abandoned. She wanted it removed because it was standing in the wrong place. Rachel opened another folder. Inside were copies of county correspondence and property negotiations. You weren't exaggerating. What? Rebecca approached you 3 separate times. The offers had started reasonably enough. $200,000, then $400,000, then nearly $700,000 for barely 8 acres. Every offer focused on the same narrow corridor along the eastern side of my ranch. I declined every one. The final letter included one sentence I hadn't thought about in years. Development always follows progress. You'll eventually realize cooperation benefits everyone. At the time, it sounded like ordinary sales pressure. Now it read like a promise. Rachel reached for another document. This arrived through a public records request this morning. It was a financial statement from Black Pine Ridge. One payment immediately stood out. Community wildfire safety improvements, $412,000. What's that? I asked. Rachel pointed farther down the page. The recipient. Dalton Excavation. The company name matched the logo still painted across the bulldozer sitting beside my destroyed foundation. They used HOA reserve funds. They disguised demolition as wildfire safety work. Rachel leaned back. If homeowners knew their emergency reserve account paid to destroy property outside the subdivision, they'd revolt. Her phone rang before she could finish. It was Sheriff Daniel Brooks. She placed him on speaker. I spoke with the contractor this morning. What did he say? Rachel asked. His name's Mark Dalton. At first, he refused to answer questions. And now? He admitted Rebecca personally hired his company. I felt my jaw tighten. Daniel continued. She handed him the demolition permit herself. So she can't blame another board member. No. Rachel asked the next question. Did he know the permit was fake? I don't think so. Daniel paused. But he did tell me something interesting. What? He says Rebecca assured the crew the homeowner had passed away while working out of state. I stared across Rachel's office. What? According to Dalton, Rebecca told everyone there were no surviving heirs. Rachel slowly lowered her pen. She declared you dead, so no one would question demolishing the house. Daniel wasn't finished. When Dalton asked whether anyone should remove personal belongings first, Rebecca supposedly said everything inside had been legally abandoned. I looked down at my hands. Family photographs, my father's journals, my grandfather's surveying tools. Everything had been buried under that lie. Rachel broke the silence. Sheriff, did Dalton say who authorized payment? Rebecca signed every invoice herself. Another piece clicked into place. She had hired the contractor, supplied the forged permit, declared me dead, approved the payments, ordered the demolition. But one question still remained unanswered. Rachel folded the development map and looked directly at me. If Rebecca expected to own that road corridor, she tapped the empty rectangle marking my former office. Why was your vault the only place they excavated below the foundation? Neither of us spoke, because for the first time, it seemed possible they hadn't been searching for valuables. They'd been searching for the documents proving they could never own my land. That night, I sat in the small rental cabin Rachel had arranged for me and tried to remember every system still connected to the ranch. The house cameras were gone with the walls. The workshop recorder had been crushed. Then I remembered the ridge camera. 7 years earlier, after a lightning strike started a fire near the north timberline, I mounted a solar-powered forestry camera above the access road. It tracked elk movement, smoke, and unauthorized vehicles entering the property. The camera sat nearly half a mile from the house, hidden inside a weatherproof box high on a ponderosa pine. I drove out before sunrise. The box was still there. Someone had opened it and removed the memory card, but the small transmission light continued blinking. That mattered. During wildfire season, the unit uploaded motion-triggered clips to a remote forestry account whenever it detected a vehicle. I had not logged into that account in years. Rachel met me at her office while I worked through old passwords. On the fourth attempt, the archive opened. The first clip was time-stamped 5:41 a.m., 4 days after I left Montana. Rebecca's white SUV came through my gate. Behind it followed 2 excavators, a bulldozer, 3 dump trucks, and Mark Dalton's pickup. The next clip showed Rebecca standing beside my front porch with a rolled set of plans under one arm. She pointed toward the eastern wall, the side facing the proposed highway corridor. Another recording showed her walking the perimeter with Mark. The camera was too far away to capture every word, but the microphone picked up enough. "Start with the house," Rebecca said, "then the barn, the well equipment, and that stone wall." Mark looked toward the building. "There are belongings inside. They were abandoned." "What about the owner?" "There is no owner who can challenge this." I felt my hands tighten around the edge of Rachel's desk. The footage advanced. At 9:18 a.m., the excavator tore through the roof. At 11:06, the front wall collapsed. At 1:32, a smaller machine moved toward my office. We watched its bucket dig beneath the slab until a steel corner appeared. The operator stopped. Rebecca walked into frame. She directed 2 workers to attach chains around the floor vault, then watched them lifted into the back of her SUV. Rachel paused the video. "There's your stolen property." I said nothing. On the screen, the house my family had protected for generations was disappearing one wall at a time. The next clip captured the old dining room opening to daylight. For a second, I could see the table my father had built before debris folded over it. Rachel lowered the volume. "You don't have to keep watching." "Yes, I do." The final recording was taken near sunset. Mark stood beside Rebecca while the bulldozer pushed broken stone away from the cleared corridor. His voice came through faintly. "You sure you want the well and fence gone too?" Rebecca answered clearly enough that neither of us needed the volume raised. "Leave nothing that lets him come back and live here again." Rachel saved copies to 3 separate drives and sent one directly to Sheriff Brooks. Then she closed the laptop. "We file for a restraining order tomorrow." "And release the footage?" "No." I looked at her. "She destroyed my home on camera." "I know." "Then why wait?" "Because she still believes the camera card is missing, and the evidence died with your house." Rachel placed both hands on the desk. "At the hearing, I want her under oath. I want her to say she was never there." I understood then. The footage already proved trespass, theft, and intentional destruction. But if Rebecca denied it in court, her own words would turn the video into something even more damaging. Rachel slid a legal pad toward me. "From this point forward, silence is part of the case." The next morning, we filed an emergency petition to stop Black Pine Ridge from placing a lien on my ranch, entering the property, transferring any claimed interest, or destroying additional records. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. Rebecca arrived at the courthouse smiling. She still believed the only camera that had seen her was hanging empty above the timberline. She crossed the hallway with the confidence of someone who expected a routine hearing instead of the beginning of a lawsuit that could unravel everything she had built. Her attorney greeted Rachel Bennett with a polite nod. "I trust we're here to discuss a reasonable settlement." Rachel smiled faintly. "We're here to discuss facts." The hearing lasted less than 10 minutes before Judge Samuel Whitmore entered the courtroom. He reviewed the emergency petition, glanced toward both tables, and began with a simple question. "Miss Holloway, did Black Pine Ridge authorize demolition of Mr. Mercer's residence?" Rebecca stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Under what authority?" "Emergency authority granted through the county after multiple inspections determined the structure posed an immediate danger." Rachel made no objection. She simply wrote something in her notebook. The judge continued. "Were you personally involved in supervising the demolition?" Rebecca answered without hesitation. "No, Your Honor." She folded her hands neatly in front of her. "I was informed after the contractor completed the work." Rachel remained completely still. I looked at her, expecting her to stand. She didn't. Judge Whitmore turned another page. "Did you ever enter Mr. Mercer's property during the demolition?" "No." "Did you issue instructions to the contractor?" "No." Did you remove any property from the residence? Absolutely not. Every answer came quickly, confidently, without the slightest pause. Rebecca believed she had buried the evidence beneath my foundation. Instead, she was burying herself beneath sworn testimony. Judge Whitmore shifted his attention toward Rachel. Counsel? Rachel stood. Your Honor, today's hearing concerns preservation of evidence and protection of the property while this matter proceeds. She deliberately avoided mentioning the camera footage. We request a temporary restraining order preventing Black Pine Ridge from entering Mr. Mercer's ranch, filing any lien against his property, transferring any claimed interest, or destroying documents relevant to this litigation. Rebecca's attorney immediately objected. The association has acted lawfully from the beginning. Rachel calmly slid the forged demolition permit across the bench. The permit has no county record. She placed a certified copy of my deed beside it. My client's property has never belonged to Black Pine Ridge. Then she added one final document. The county clerk's written certification confirming that no demolition application had ever been filed for Mercer Ranch. The courtroom fell quiet. Judge Whitmore read each page carefully. Finally, he looked toward Rebecca. Can the association produce an authentic county demolition file? Rebecca glanced at her attorney. It remains within our administrative records. The judge frowned. That wasn't my question. Her attorney stood. We'll provide all supporting documentation during discovery. Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. You'll provide it within 7 days. He signed the order before him. The court grants the temporary restraining order. His pen never hesitated. Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Association is prohibited from placing any lien against Mercer Ranch, entering the property without permission, transferring any claimed ownership interest, or destroying records potentially relevant to this litigation. He looked directly at Rebecca. That includes emails, meeting minutes, financial records, contractor communications, and electronic files. Rebecca forced another smile. Of course, Your Honor. The hearing ended moments later. Outside the courthouse, local reporters gathered near the front steps. Rebecca reached them first. She spoke confidently into several microphones. This lawsuit threatens every homeowner in Black Pine Ridge. She claimed I was trying to force ordinary families to pay millions because I refused to maintain my own property. Biting, local television stations repeated her statement. Neighbors began posting online that I wanted to bankrupt the community. Several homeowners gathered near the subdivision entrance carrying handmade signs. Save our HOA. Don't let Mercer destroy Black Pine Ridge. Rachel watched the broadcasts from her office without reacting. They're trying to win in public before they lose in court. I stared at one interview where Rebecca calmly insisted she had never even seen the demolition until afterward. I want people to know she's lying. They will. When? Rachel opened the evidence folder containing copies of the Ridge camera footage. When the timing gives us the greatest advantage. She tapped the transcript of Rebecca's testimony. Today she denied entering your ranch. Another tap. She denied directing the contractor. Another. She denied removing your property. Rachel carefully closed the folder. Those weren't just statements anymore. They were sworn testimony. She looked at me with the first genuine smile I'd seen since my house disappeared. Ethan. Yes? This stopped being a property dispute the moment Rebecca chose to lie under oath. Rachel slid the transcript into a folder marked Deposition Strategy. Now we let the documents speak. 3 days later, her phone rang just after sunset. She listened without interrupting, then scribbled an address onto a legal pad. When she hung up, she looked at me. Someone inside the HOA wants to meet. An hour later, we parked behind a small diner outside Livingston. A woman in her mid-40s stepped out of an aging sedan, looking over both shoulders before walking toward us. I'm Laura Collins. I recognized the name immediately. Black Pine Ridge's treasurer. I don't have much time, she said quietly. If Rebecca finds out I'm here, she'll tell everyone I stole association records. Rachel didn't rush her. What changed your mind? Laura swallowed. I believed her. She stared down at her hands. She told the board your house had already been condemned by the county. She said the owner had disappeared and there weren't any heirs. And the board approved demolition? Laura shook her head. That's why I'm here. She opened a laptop. I handle the association's accounting software and document backups. She pulled up 2 versions of the same meeting minutes. The first file was saved on May 11th. Rachel leaned closer. The minutes showed one motion: approve an engineering inspection of the Mercer residence. Nothing else. Laura opened a second file. This version appeared 2 days later. Now the minutes contained an entirely different vote. Board unanimously authorizes immediate emergency demolition. The timestamp had changed. The wording had changed. Even the voting record had changed. Rachel looked at Laura. Who edited it? Laura rotated the screen. The revision history showed one administrator account, Rebecca Holloway. No one else had permission to alter final minutes, Laura said. Rachel remained calm, but I could see the satisfaction in her expression. This is exactly what we needed. Laura wasn't finished. She opened another folder labeled Reserve Expenditures. I started reviewing payments after your lawsuit. Several transfers appeared on the screen. One went to Dalton Excavation, another to a consulting company called Hollow Creek Strategies. Rachel frowned. Who's the owner? Laura clicked once more. Rebecca's brother. There was never any consulting work. I know. The next document was even worse. It was an email from Rebecca to Gregory Sutton, the developer. Rachel read it aloud. Once Mercer loses the residence, the assessment process will finish him. The corridor should be available before financing closes. The room fell silent. Laura looked at me. I didn't understand what she meant until after your house disappeared. Rachel printed every email immediately. Then Laura hesitated. There's one more. She opened a spreadsheet hidden inside a private administrative folder. One line had been highlighted in yellow. Completion bonus. President authorization only. Amount $750,000. Recipient Rebecca Holloway. No. The word escaped before I realized I'd spoken. Laura nodded slowly. The payment was scheduled after the developer received the road corridor. Rachel closed the laptop. This wasn't about HOA rules. It never was. It was a land acquisition. Laura looked exhausted. I should have questioned everything sooner. Rachel shook her head. You questioned it now. Then she asked the question that changed everything again. Do you know where Ethan's missing property went? Laura hesitated. I've never seen the vault. But I've seen invoices. For what? Monthly rent. Rachel leaned forward. Rent on what? A commercial storage warehouse outside town. She handed over another printed report. The tenant wasn't Rebecca. It wasn't the developer. It was Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Laura lowered her voice even further. Rebecca stopped letting the board use that storage unit months ago. What does she keep there? I asked. I don't know. She looked at me. But after your house was demolished, 3 separate access logs were recorded the same day. Rachel immediately picked up her phone. Within minutes, Sheriff Daniel Brooks answered. We've got probable cause, Rachel said without preamble. For what? Altered corporate records. She glanced toward Laura. Fraudulent financial transfers. Another page. And evidence suggesting stolen personal property is being concealed inside an HOA-controlled warehouse. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'll start drafting the warrant. Laura quietly packed her laptop. Before leaving, she looked back one final time. I kept thinking Rebecca was protecting the community. She forced a tired smile. I never realized she was protecting herself. As she drove away, Rachel folded every document into a growing evidence binder. We've crossed another line. Meaning? We're no longer trying to prove Rebecca destroyed your house. She looked toward the warrant application already printing beside her desk. We're about to find out what she was trying to hide after she destroyed it. Sheriff Daniel Brooks executed the warrant the next morning. The warehouse sat behind a chain-link fence on the industrial edge of town, a low metal building with no Black Pine Ridge sign and no reason for residents to know it existed. Daniel cut the association's padlock only after photographing it and reading the warrant aloud for the body camera. Rachel and I waited outside until deputies cleared the building. Then Daniel stepped back into the sunlight. "Ethan," he said, "you need to see this." The first row held patio furniture, holiday decorations, and boxes of old HOA files. The second row held my life. My father's framed photographs leaned against a wall beneath a plastic tarp. My grandfather's surveying tools sat inside an open crate. 2 filing cabinets from my office had been forced apart, their drawers emptied into boxes marked for destruction. At the far end of the unit rested the steel floor vault. Its door had been pried open. I stopped several feet away. The blackened scrape marks along its side matched the chains visible in the ridge camera footage. Daniel handed me gloves before allowing me closer. Inside were family journals, tax receipts, the original ranch patent, and several certified boundary records. But the historic highway map was missing. Rachel searched every folder twice. Nothing. Rebecca had kept the deed proving I owned the ranch, but removed the one document that could block the road project. On a shelf beside the vault, deputies found 3 HOA backup drives and 6 bankers' boxes labeled "Shred." Daniel sealed all of it as evidence. Rebecca arrived before the search was finished. Her SUV stopped outside the fence, and she marched toward the entrance with her attorney behind her. "This is association property," she shouted. "You have no right to remove anything." Daniel held up the warrant. "A judge disagrees." Rebecca pointed toward the vault. "We stored those items to protect Mr. Mercer's belongings after the emergency demolition." I looked at her. You stole a safe from beneath my house." "We preserved abandoned property." "You told the contractor I was dead." Her expression tightened. "That is not what I said." Daniel stepped between us. "Save it for the deposition." Back at Rachel's office, Tom Alvarez examined the surviving boundary documents. When he learned the highway map was missing, he went silent. Then he made a phone call. "I may have another copy." Years earlier, Tom had reviewed access routes during a county wildfire planning project. Because Mercer Ranch bordered timberland, the county had required a certified copy of every private road crossing the area. By evening, Tom returned with a sealed records envelope. Inside was the missing map. A narrow parcel ran from my eastern pasture beneath the subdivision's secondary evacuation lane. Black Pine Ridge had used that road for years, but the map showed no permanent easement, only a revocable emergency access license signed by my father. Rachel read the conditions aloud. The lane could be used during wildfire, evacuation, or official emergency response. It could not support residential expansion, construction traffic, retail access, or private development. I owned the ground beneath the HOA's only secondary route out. Rebecca had tried to steal my corridor while depending on another piece of my land for her residents' safety. Rachel looked at me carefully. "You could revoke this." "No. Legally, you have grounds. I'm not trapping families behind her mistake." We petitioned Judge Whitmore to place the lane under temporary court supervision. Emergency access would remain open, but Rebecca could no longer use it for construction or claim it as HOA property. The judge signed the order that afternoon. For the first time, Rebecca lost control of both roads. That evening, forensic technicians connected the recovered backup server. Most recent files had been deleted. One directory had been erased repeatedly. The recovery process took hours. Just before midnight, a folder reappeared on the screen. Its title was only 3 words: Mercer Removal Sequence. Rachel opened it. The first page contained a date from 2 weeks before I left Montana. The second contained a numbered plan. And the first instruction read, "Wait until Mercer is gone." The rest of the file was worse. Step 2 directed Rebecca to use an emergency safety declaration before anyone could challenge the inspection. Step 3 ordered the house, barn, well equipment, and stone wall removed in a single day. Step 4 called for the recovery of ownership-sensitive documents from beneath my office. Step 5 instructed Black Pine Ridge to bill me for demolition, penalties, and legal fees large enough to support a lien. Step 6 identified a shell company that would purchase the ranch at foreclosure. The final step transferred the Eastern Corridor to Gregory Sutton's development group. Rachel read the document twice before speaking. This isn't evidence of a bad decision. It's a blueprint. It's conspiracy written in sequence. Forensic analysts traced the document to Rebecca's administrator account. The creation date was 2 weeks before I left for the forestry contract. Editing history showed she had revised it after confirming my travel schedule. Attached emails removed the last uncertainty. One message to Gregory promised the corridor would be cleared before his financing deadline. Another warned that I kept original land records in a floor vault beneath my office. A third stated, "Once the residence is gone, Mercer will have no practical reason to hold the parcel." Rachel forwarded the recovered folder to Sheriff Brooks and the county prosecutor. Then she scheduled Rebecca's deposition. Rebecca arrived with 2 attorneys and the same controlled expression she had worn in court. She answered basic questions carefully, admitting she had discussed the development but denying any connection between the road project and my demolished house. Rachel placed a printed copy of the removal plan on the table. "Have you seen this document before?" Rebecca barely looked at it. "No. The account history identifies you as the author." "Then someone used my login." "Were you present at Mercer Ranch on the morning of demolition?" "No." "Did you direct Mark Dalton or his employees?" "No." "Did you order the removal of Mr. Mercer's floor vault?" "Absolutely not." Rachel let the silence stretch. Rebecca mistook it for uncertainty. She leaned back. "I relied on professionals. Mr. Mercer is trying to turn an unfortunate safety action into some theatrical conspiracy." Rachel closed the paper file. Then she opened her laptop. The first Ridge camera clip filled the screen. Rebecca's white SUV passed through my gate at 5:41 a.m. The second showed her standing beside my porch with rolled plans in her hand. The third showed her pointing toward the eastern wall. Rebecca stopped moving. Rachel played the clip of the vault being chained and lifted into her SUV. One of Rebecca's attorneys whispered something to the other. Rachel advanced to the final recording. Rebecca's voice came through clearly. "Leave nothing that lets him come back and live here again." No one spoke after the video ended. Rachel looked directly at Rebecca. "You testified under oath that you were never there." Rebecca's attorney stood immediately. "We need a recess." Rachel didn't argue. She had already obtained what she needed. Outside the conference room, Sheriff Brooks waited near the elevator. "The prosecutor has the recovery report," he said. "And the videos?" "All of them." Rebecca emerged several minutes later without her smile. For the first time, she avoided looking at me. But Rachel wasn't finished. Back in her office, she placed the forged demolition permit beneath a document examiner's lamp. A faint identification code appeared along the lower edge, almost invisible beneath the copied county seal. The code did not belong to Mercer Ranch. It traced to an old private renovation permit issued years earlier to Rebecca's family. Rachel stared at the result. She didn't obtain this from a county insider. "What does that mean?" It means Rebecca took a legitimate blank form, copied the seal, changed the address, added a dead inspector's name, and created the demolition permit herself. The recovered plan proved motive. The footage proved action. Her testimony proved the lie. But the permit was about to prove something even worse. Every piece of authority Rebecca had claimed began at her own desk. And at trial, the jury would see exactly how she manufactured it. The courtroom was full before Judge Samuel Whitmore entered. Residents from Black Pine Ridge filled one side of the gallery. Many had come expecting to watch their HOA defend itself. Instead, they found themselves watching the evidence unfold in the exact order Rebecca had tried to erase it. Rachel Bennett began without raising her voice. "This case is not about an abandoned house," she told the jury. "It is about a woman who decided that if she destroyed a home, she could destroy the owner's rights with it." She placed my original ranch deed on the evidence table. The Mercer Ranch has never belonged to Black Pine Ridge. Next came the certified county record showing no demolition permit had ever been issued. Then Tom Alvarez testified. He explained that the inspector whose name appeared on Rebecca's permit had died 2 years earlier and that the permit number matched no county filing system. Mark Dalton followed him. The contractor admitted Rebecca personally hired his company, handed him the demolition paperwork, and assured him I had died without heirs. "I believed her," Mark said quietly. "If I'd known the permit was fake, my equipment never would have crossed that gate." Laura Collins took the stand next. She identified the altered board minutes, the hidden payments from HOA reserve funds, the completion bonus promised to Rebecca, and the emails discussing the road corridor before my house was ever demolished. Finally, Sheriff Daniel Brooks testified. He described recovering my floor vault from the HOA warehouse and explained how document examiners traced the demolition permit to an old blank form Rebecca's family had legally received years earlier for a private renovation. "It wasn't stolen from the county," Daniel said. "It was manufactured." Rachel waited until every witness had finished. Then she dimmed the courtroom lights. The Ridge camera footage appeared on the screen. The jury watched Rebecca's SUV enter my ranch. They watched her point toward my house. They watched my vault lifted into her vehicle. Then they heard her voice. "Leave nothing that lets him come back and live here again." When the lights came back on, nobody in the courtroom spoke. Rachel faced Rebecca one final time. "You testified under oath that you never entered Mercer Ranch." Rebecca stared at the table. "You denied directing the contractor." Silence. "You denied removing Mr. Mercer's property." Still nothing. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. "Ms. Holloway, you are under oath." Rebecca finally spoke. "I relied on legal advice." Rachel immediately produced the recovered planning document. "And who advised you to write this?" She read the title aloud. "Mercer Removal Sequence." Then she read its final instruction. "Transfer the corridor after foreclosure." Rebecca's attorney objected. Judge Whitmore overruled him. The document went to the jury. Deliberations lasted less than 2 days. When the jurors returned, the foreperson stood. "We find in favor of the plaintiff." Count after count followed. Fraud, forgery, trespass, conversion of personal property, civil conspiracy, intentional destruction of property, abuse of legal process, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The compensatory and punitive damages totaled $12 million. But Judge Whitmore had one final ruling. The evidence establishes that the Mercer residence possessed historic, architectural, and personal value beyond ordinary market replacement. He looked directly at Rebecca. "Money alone cannot restore what was intentionally destroyed." The courtroom became completely silent. This court orders Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Association to reconstruct the Mercer residence upon its original foundation, using materials of equal or greater quality. The association shall also restore the barn, water well, stone fencing, ranch entrance, and all damage directly caused by the unlawful demolition. Construction would proceed under a court-appointed preservation expert. Every invoice would be paid by the HOA separately from the $12 million judgment. Rebecca would never again serve as an officer or director of any homeowners association within the state. Before she could leave the courtroom, Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped beside her. "Rebecca Holloway," she slowly turned. "You're under arrest for forgery, theft of property, conspiracy, and obstruction arising from this investigation." He placed handcuffs on her wrists. No one applauded. The only sound was the quiet click of the cuffs closing. 18 months later, I stood once again on the porch of my rebuilt ranch house. The stone chimney had been reconstructed from recovered masonry. The cedar beams matched the originals. My father's ranch sign hung beside the gate where it belonged. Inside my office, above the restored survey table, I framed a copy of Judge Whitmore's final order. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Paper had protected my land long before I ever could. I later used part of the judgment to help establish a legal assistance fund for rural landowners facing unlawful property seizures, and to support the county's effort to digitize historic deeds and boundary records so no one else would lose a home because someone believed old documents could simply disappear. Months after construction ended, the newly elected president of Black Pine Ridge drove to my gate. She carried no violation notice, no attorney, only engineering drawings requesting permission to repair a drainage line near our shared boundary. I reviewed the plans, added one condition protecting 2 mature pines, and signed. "Thank you," she said. "That's how neighbors are supposed to solve problems." As she drove away, I looked back at the house Rebecca believed she could erase with a forged permit and a bulldozer. She was wrong. She didn't bury my rights beneath the foundation. She uncovered the truth that destroyed her own.
If there's one lesson I heard stay with you after this story, is this: never assume that something receivers is protected simply because it's been yours for a long time. My family kept all of this, our records and our histories, because each generation understood that ownership isn't just about land, it's about responsibilities. When everything I could see was gone, it was an angel that carried me forward. It was patience, careful records, and the willingness to let the truth speak, one document at a time. That's what brought my home back, not shortcuts or loud arguments. Stories like this remind me that dignity is often quiet. It's choosing the lawful path when someone else expects you to give. Keeping your word even when others don't, and remembering that communities are strongest when they build on honor instead of power. That's a lesson worth holding on to, whether you live on a ranch, in the neighborhood, or anywhere else you call home. Now, I'm really glad to hear from you. If you believe standing your ground with patience and the truth is always worth it, type yes in the comments. And if you ever deal with an HOA, a property dispute, or a situation where good records make a difference, share your experience below. I read far more of your story than you might think. And if you enjoy stories about ordinary people protecting their land, their families, and their dignity through the law, I'd be honored to help you subscribe and join us for the next one. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of the place you call home.